Join us today as we share videos from the vault, special presentations, past interviews, and share with you the A.R.E. through the ages.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jessica Newell. I'm the Archivist for the Edgar Cayce Foundation. And tonight I'm going to be sharing with you the stories of some people that I have found really compelling as I've been working on this collection. Now, for the past 2 years, I've been doing a complete re-inventory of the archive. We have about 800 lit-year feet of material, which is a lot of stuff. Right now we're about 430 feet in, so we're going right along. And so the archive, we know it was established in 1948 to preserve and make accessible Edgar Cayce's readings. But we have an amazing variety of records in the archive that tell the stories of so many more people. So we've got over 500 case files of reading recipients, but we have, at my last count, over 800 people represented in the collection that were all drawn to the work during the course of the 20th century, and they all have incredible stories to tell. So when I'm doing this inventory and I'm processing the collections, I'm going from disorganized to organized, and you're getting in that momentum of processing, and it's really satisfying to get things all organized and be able to find what you need for pieces of our archive. But you also, as an archivist, kind of get sucked into the stories of these people's lives. So you think as archivists, you're organizing, you're filing, but it's so much more than that. You're looking at the paper remnants of these people's activities over time, and so you can really go down the rabbit hole and really get sucked in, and you want to know the end of the tales of all these people. And so as I'm working in the ECF archive, what I find most compelling for me is the work that happens behind the scenes. What are the practicalities of organizing and running an organization dedicated to psychic work? We've got Edgar doing the readings and exploring all these facets of psychic phenomena, but you've got to have the practical organization underpinning that work to make it successful and to share it with as many people as you can. So as I was going through this collection and taking note of all the people and the interesting things I found along the way, I found this really two critical points in the story of the A.R.E. These moments of transition where things could have ended, but they endured, and we're all sitting here today. So these 2 points, we've got 1931, when the A.R.E. was founded, and we've got 1945, after Edgar's death, and they're deciding what they want to do with all this material. So I'm going to share with you some stories of people surrounding Edgar Cayce and his work, who came together and worked out practical solutions of what to do with all of the psychic data. So we're going to start here in the late 1920s. Now this is a postcard from a collection of the Cayce Hospital, built beginning in 1927 and opened in 1928. Now if you can picture Virginia Beach at that time, you have the hospital going up on one of the tallest points on the beach, and you've got the Cavalier Hotel down the beach at the same time, and there's really little else between the two. Virginia Beach is just a small fishing town, and it's not going to be starting to be built up into the city we know today until later on in the 20th century, 1950s, 1960s. So a group has come together around Edgar. He moved to Virginia Beach in 1925, and so he has New York financiers Morton Edwin Blumenthal financing the work. and they formed an organization to study the readings called the Association of National Investigators. Now, their focus is to study the readings, but the other is really to run the hospital. And so the organization takes over the administration, they're welcoming patients, and this is really Edgar's dream come true. He's been trying to collect funds for years to open up a hospital where people could come and they would be able to receive the treatments outlined in the readings. Now, it's not just a hospital, it's actually, a learning center as well. Morton Blumenthal and several others, including Edgar, are actually holding lectures in the hospital building and around the Hampton Roads area as well to try to drum up support. And so to get that support, and publications were imperative. So it's not like today where we have word about our activities. So these three are the first brochures we have that were published by the Association of National Investigators. Gladys actually kept an excellent historical record. At the end of our readings collection, we actually have several files labeled Gladys's work files. And so any letters or publications that A.R.E. and all the other organizations put out, she put everything in chronological order. So it's an incredible resource for us because we can track the history of this organization through the entire 20th century. So the first brochure we've got, you can see Edgar Cayce's life seal is on the cover. They actually use that for this brochure and for the letterhead as well on all their correspondence. They kind of switch between this seal, the letterhead, and this beautiful colorized picture of the Cayce Hospital. In the middle, we've got the testimony that inspired the Institute of the Association of National Investigators. So this is a collection of letters and reports sent in, all of people that Edgar Cayce helped, and they put it into one booklet. At the end of all these booklets, there is a form, an application form to become a member and to receive readings from Edgar. And so it wasn't just, the literature that they were publishing. They really wanted to find any sort of print outlet they could. So we've got a letter to one of Edgar's friends in Alabama from Gladys Davis in early 1931. And she's excited because she has been in contact with the Virginia Beach News at the time. And she's saying, if I get enough news subscriptions, the Virginia Beach News will publish Mr. Cayce's talk throughout the year, which would have been, such a great deal to them. We know that Edgar would be giving these lectures at the hospital and in Norfolk. And so we actually have a collection of these typewritten, around 20 or so on different topics found in the readings. And so he would go, to the Waverly Hotel in Virginia Beach. He would go to to coffee shops in Norfolk and hotels in Norfolk as well, and give these hour-long talks and Q&A and try to, get interest in the local community that way. Now, meanwhile, as all this is going on, you've got Hewlin Cayce, Edgar Cayce's oldest son, and he is attending Washington and Lee University. Where Thomas Segru is attending as well. Now, they are roommates. At first, they did not care for each other one bit. Hewlin was very enthusiastic about his father's work and was telling Tom all about it. Tom was not so interested at first, but after becoming friends with Hewlin, visiting the Cayce family, he really had a change of heart and really was enthusiastic about doing all he could to help out the work. So while they're at school together, they are both on the yearbook staff. Tom is doing a lot of writing. He's doing yearbook, he's doing magazine, literary journal, all sorts of things, because his goal is to become a professional writer. Once they graduate, Tom goes back up to his home of Connecticut for a little bit, and then Hewlin actually comes down back to Virginia Beach and becomes the librarian for Atlantic University, its first incarnation. So at the same time, they also decide they're going to co-produce a journal. So it was called The New Tomorrow. It only ran for 2 issues because the National Investigators dissolved about 2 issues into the journal, and that was the first long form articles written about different topics in the readings that Tom and Hewlin would both explore. So it's really interesting to think about that as Tom Segru was working on his coursework and all these extracurricular activities. He was also basically running the publication department of what would become the A.R.E. from his dorm room, which is really fun to think about. And so Tom actually later becomes a reporter. He moves to New York City. He spends a few weeks walking around trying to get an in into one of the papers, and he ends up becoming a reporter for the New York Herald. And so whenever Edgar Cayce comes up the news, Tom would cover him favorably. He would send Edgar excerpts from different papers and kind of send his commentary upon them. And so he's getting all this journalistic experience, all this writing experience that he's going to use later on to apply to Edgar's work and eventually write There's a River, the first biography. But just as everything is seeming to culminate, the publications are strong, hostels running, everything crashes down in 1931 with the stresses that came on from the Great Depression. So the National Investigators actually dissolve in late February of 1931. So the hospital closes, Atlantic University closes, and the Cayces actually have to leave their rented house because the financiers of the whole work have decided to pull out all their funding. So, Edgar has to make a choice. Does he give up? Does he go back to photography and just, let this dream go? Or is he going to look around at the people around him and see if they can help? In early March of 1931, he actually writes a letter to everyone that are still supporting his work. And he writes, "A time arises in every individual's life when changes come that are oftentimes viewed with fear and troubling. Such a time has come to all those who have been and are interested in the phenomena which manifests itself through me. We've arrived at that place where, as individuals, we must determine whether it has anything to do with our individual lives or not, and if it does, as to whether it is something we would like to pass on to future generations." The passing of the Association of National Investigators may seem ominous to many, but if we will use failures as stepping stones, we may map to higher things. So he actually asked them right out, what should we do? What are your suggestions, your thoughts, your feelings? How should we proceed? And so he tells them, make this a personal thing, not for me, for I feel that you, as many of hundreds of others, do really think a great deal of the man named Edgar Cayce, or I would not have addressed you as I do. Yet it is not the man himself you are to think of. It's that which comes through this man. You know in what you have believed. It is yourself, your mind, your abilities, for which I'm asking. And this is a theme that runs through this whole story, is that people drawn to the work, they always apply their own abilities, their own skills, their own perspectives onto what they do with Edgar Cayce's work. By the end of March, things are sort of looking up. Edgar knows we've got a chance to actually continue this thing. And Tom actually continues to be heavily involved. So this is a quick night letter that Hewlin sent to Tom. And this is actually the list of what he's interested Tom ask for a reading. So he's saying, Tom, make a list. ask about your future connection with the work. How are we going to develop publication, data, lecture departments, research? How are we going to organize ourselves, and how can we make this situation a lot more stable so that we can continue this work? And Hewlin seems very optimistic. He says at the end, things look a whole lot better. 10 questions at once. So, Tom replies, he sends his questions, and they start going and taking what will be known as work readings. We're also trying to figure out at this point, what are we going to call ourselves, since we don't have national investigators anymore? So Tom kind of brainstorms a little bit in one of his letters to Edgar in March of 1931. He kind of says, a name for the new organization is a puzzle. It can't be high-sounding. If we call it the American Institute of Psychic, or Modern, or Cosmic Research, that would be a little too boring. League of Olympus, Association of the Agora would be too frivolous. And if they called themselves the League of Gethsemane or the New Disciples, he thinks it's a tad too biblical. So after several meetings of everyone involved, they finally came up with the Association for Research and Enlightenment. So these meetings were mostly made up of local people, including Esther Wynn, who would go on to be basically the leader of the group that would be writing the Search for God book. She actually was the one that coordinated with the Norfolk publisher to get that first printing of the Search for God books. Hannah and Noah Miller as well, and Florence and Edith Edmonds. So they were all part of this prayer group. And so they're actually, most of them were all neighbors. Anna Miller and the Edmonds sisters, they all live down the street from one another. And it's funny, actually, I live just a few neighborhoods down from where they all lived in that point in Fairmount Park in Norfolk. Pretty fun to think about. So A.R.E. officially started July 7th, 1931. There were approximately 115 members that were officially signed up at that point. And they experienced, steady growth throughout the 30s, even though all the stresses from the Great Depression were happening. We've got the study group work. We've got lots of, new publications. They were doing very small runs. They had a hand-cranked mimeograph machine that they were using to publish copies of all this stuff. And so by the early 1940s, we've got approximately up to 1,000 members by this time, especially after There's a River came out in November of 1942. Tom had been actually thinking about writing some sort of biography of Edgar Cayce back in the 1930s. Tom Segura's original idea was actually to write a screen treatment for Hollywood. And then that morphed into a biography, and then he stayed with the Cayces through the late 1939 and into 41. He would make trips and stay with the Cayces so he could receive treatment from his readings, and also be there at the same time to interview Edgar and members of his family to write that book. And so it's really interesting when you look in the correspondence from that time. Tom wrote the drafts. He sent it to the publisher, and the publisher actually rejected that first draft. And so he rewrote the entire book before it was finally published in November of 1942. As a result of that, and also Marguerite Bro's article on Edgar in the Coordinate magazine in 1943, we got up to about 2,000 members by the beginning of 1945 as a result of all this national publicity that was going on. And so we come to the second turning point in January of 1945. So Edgar passes away at the beginning of that month. And so they've got to figure out, what are we going to do now? So it's in September of 1944. When Edgar had his stroke and was trying to recover, So Gladys had been actually booking readings appointments for the following 2 years, doing mass rescheduling of readings. And so after Edgar's death, they actually reimbursed most of these people for the money that they would have spent on the reading. And so we start with 2,000 members, and after reimbursements, we have 300 members that are actually remaining. And so the big question now is, shall the A.R.E. continue even though Edgar Cayce is not here with us to give readings? So what I found really interesting, Gladys just took tons and tons of notes, and she write little sides and tops of things, just really down to the granular level, the sort of documentation of what is actually happening on the ground at this time. So she's got one note about all of the people that would call the phone in the office right after Edgar's passing. So she titled it "Phone Rings at A.R.E., January 1945. First call. Gladys, this is Lydia Schrader Gray in New Orleans. You know Edgar wanted me to come back there and help you all after Lorraine's marriage. Now that Edgar's gone, I don't know what to do. Do you think I should still come? This is Lydia right here with her niece on the left, Lorraine. They volunteered for the Red Cross during the war, so this photo dates from around 1942. So Gladys tells her, of course, Lydia, come right ahead. You're needed now more than ever. We need people like you who understand, who can help us carry on the ideals and the purposes for which he stood. So Lydia became really, really important in the late 40s. She became the first official A.R.E. speaker. So she would travel on her own by car. Later she'd be joined by Edgar Cayce. And they would pack enough literature to fill the trunk of their car, go to their first stop, give a lecture, sell as many publications as they could, and use that money to go on to the next stop. She was also the head of the House Committee. So we've got a picture right here of the Art at Crescent House, Edgar and Gertrude Cayce's home. On the left side, you see that low building there. That is the addition that was put on in 1940 that houses the library and the first vault where the readings were kept. And so you've got the office of A.R.E. going on. You've got the Cayce family's house. You've also got lodgers staying at this time, either A.R.E. members working on research, also local people, and the wives of servicemen also. And so you've got this, really, really busy household going on. And so, Lydia and Gladys and many others were helping Gertrude just keep up the household, like the important task of feeding, 6+ people a day, keeping up with the house. And so Lydia coordinated all the efforts to make sure that Gertrude had everything she needed, that the house had everything, all the, the groceries and the household objects, everything they needed to make that house run. Gladys is meanwhile getting calls about other jobs. So everyone in the community, they knew how skilled she was at stenography and her secretarial work. And so she's getting a call such as, this is A.R.E. at Fuel, Feed, and Building Supplies. We are so sorry to hear about Mr. Cayce's death. Now we're wondering if you'd care to come work for us. And she answers, oh, Ed, I'm so sorry. Hewlin is still overseas, and Edgar Evans still in the service. Besides, my work is cut out for me here. The A.R.E. work will continue, and I'm needed to hold things together until the boys get back. And so Edgar Cayce's 2 sons were in the service at this time, so Gladys knew that this work was going to continue, but she was waiting until everyone got together so they could come up with a definite plan. And meanwhile, as all this is going on, Edgar Cayce is thinking about the future as well, as he is going across Europe. He's been assigned to turn out patents through Army. He's in the Special Services Unit, which is the one in charge of coordinating recreation for the troops, like movies and stuff like that. And so that's applying his previous experience back at Virginia Beach. He was actually director of recreation for the city. He's working with the USO. And so he's applying all that skill over to his position when he finds himself in the Army. Now, he's not, keeping quiet about this work. He's very excited about his father's work, and he's telling everyone that he comes across, everyone he encounters in his unit. And a few of them are getting really interested, including his friend Vaughn Shelton, who's a cartoonist and an illustrator who gets really interested in helping out with the publication program. Here we've got a plan of the A.R.E headquarters, drawn by Vaughn Shelton. And what's really interesting about this is that this is dated from July of 1944. So about a month after D-Day, they're traveling, across with the Army, and they're actually finding time and sitting down and drawing a sketch of the A.R.E headquarters and making plans for the future, and finding the time to do all that, which is pretty incredible. So on the right-hand side, the rectangle there, that is the original Cayce residence. So you can see, the house, the library built in 1940, the reading room, offices, and then the original vault. So they envision, this whole center going up after the war. You've got way more offices. You've got a new, larger library, a lecture hall, conferences. So they know that this is what they want. This is how they envision the work continuing. They're also coming up with organizational charts. So they've got, the readings, the psychic data at the very top, which is the basis for everything, followed by board of trustees, general manager, which Ewan became when he came home, and the different facets of the organization that they envision. So what to do with the physical data, hospitals, research laboratories, educational, so lectures, classes, publication, even historical and archaeology work, study groups, psychic research. They wanted to be a leader in that field that was just beginning. And also social, making a community of learning around this information. Recreation centers, clinics, libraries. So this is a grand plan that they're envisioning, right in the middle of their Army camp. So Tom Segru also making plans. He's still a publications editor, so leading that group. And so he sends a letter in January of 1945 to the board and to Gladys and to all the staff at A.R.E over his plan, what he thinks that they all should do. So he writes, "Meanwhile, be assured that the publications will continue. We'll hold the thread for the time being until more strands can be added and woven about it. It will continue if it is possible to hold the Three Musketeers, May Sinclair, Gladys, and myself together. That is all there is to the work right now." So his conception of this, we need, in his words, active, vigorous, creative writing. Because all they have now is the data, and the data is their greatest asset. What's really interesting is that he's editor of publications. He's actually writing several booklets to start out as like the first set that they're going to offer to the public at this time. And he did a bit of ghostwriting, actually. So the Auras booklet that a lot of us are familiar with, that is, titled Auras by Edgar Cayce. Tom actually ghostwrote a booklet for Edgar, so he worked with Edgar on it, but the content and most of the writing was by Tom Segru. So Gladys is doing her best to get Hewlin back from Europe so we can get everything on an even keel. So she actually, at the end of January 1945, she wrote to the Selective Service Board for Princess Anne County and also to the field director of the American Red Cross. And she writes, as an organization, we have approximately 2,500 members. This is before the final count for the reimbursement down to 300 members. for contributing to the research work being done through our offices. There are many phases of research that are at a critical stage, and if the work is to be continued, and the last 20 years of research is to be of value to the greater number, we must be able to hold the support of the members we now have and outline a program for the future. There is no one in our organization fitted to do this as Sergeant Edgar Cayce. He has been educated with a particular purpose in mind of being able to carry on the research work for which his father laid such a firm foundation. We must have his help now, or the whole organization will lose the ground it has gained by slow, tedious, and consecrated effort toward an ideal of being of great service to humanity. Fortunately, it takes a little bit longer for Hewlin to get out of the service, and unfortunately by that time both his mother and father have passed, but he eventually gets back and takes over that role as general manager. So we're going through this reorientation process. What is the A.R.E. going to be now? Gladys was writing, newsletters to the members, and one of the lines in those really illustrates the feeling at this time. She says, we're like people who have just moved into a new house, with everything jumbled together. We know that we have all of the ingredients for preparing a meal, for making a bed, etc. If we can only find them and put them in their place. The board is trying to figure out, where do we go from here? Gladys is in on all of these meetings, and she writes to Hewlin in March of 1945, how shall I begin? Both you and Tom are clamoring for news of the association. I haven't written before because I've been completely confused by the various meetings we've had. Nothing at all was accomplished in the way of deciding upon a definite program. Everybody went around in circles, and each person had a different idea as to how to proceed. So the only thing that they could decide at this point that A.R.E. would be to study and apply the readings of Edgar Cayce. A lot of members were writing in saying, are you going to perhaps find another psychic to continue this work? And across the board they said, no, we're going to use the material that we have. So Goddess gives us a great, view of what is going on in that meeting of the board and all the different members and their perspectives on what to do. So she says that Riley Simmons said he'd like to see a school for the study of metaphysics. Esther Wynn gave a lecture on the study group work and how it was the only answer. Florence Edmonds wanted everybody to meet around an altar to meditate. Mr. Miller was very passive as chairman, probably because he had flown the group back in the meeting in October. Hilary Poole was sick with a cold in bed, otherwise the meeting might have had a little more order to it. So Gladys said she felt discouraged over the whole business. She didn't really know what to do. And she says that in the meantime, I was deluged with letters from all over the country. People saying they had been to this or that medium, heard from Mr. Cayce, wanting to know who we had found to take his place, and 1,000,001 unrelated questions which should be answered generally and not necessitate an individual letter to each person. So Gladys decides that she's going to write a new newsletter, and it's going to be different. It's going to be very personal. It's like she is writing a letter from her desk to everyone individually. So she calls it the diary letter. She says it's a way to answer everyone, a way to hold the interest of all the members, until she says we could gradually wean them away from Dad's personality toward basic principles of the association. So she says the A.R.E. should be all things to all people and thus help them all. And that their whole future as an organization is going to depend on the publications and how they're presented. So they create a new booklet entitled A.R.E. Inc. And she says it's important as there's a river to their survival. So she decides to go back to the work readings. What can she learn from them to pull to put this all together? She evolved some plans which she gave to the executive committee, who approved them. And she also started reaching out to the two main hotspots of interest in the Cayce work, apart from Virginia Beach, so New York City and Los Angeles. And she coordinated the regional representatives to begin to put feelers out on how, we can keep doing this work. This will later culminate in the campaign to begin the Edgar Cayce Foundation in 1948. And so the campaign for that actually started in New York City, led by Thomas Segru, getting all of the A.R.E. members together. And their plan was actually to microfilm the readings and then have research centers all over the country where people could go and use a microfilm reader and access the readings. So we basically have, created digital version of the original plan in the member section of our A.R.E. website, where we can access the Edgar Cayce readings database. And so what is interesting too is that the New York group actually paid for Gertrude Cayce's living expenses from January until April of 1945, and made sure that she didn't want for anything. So Gladys's plans are really reflected in the new member package she put together in the spring of 1945. And so this is a great resource because it outlines everything, all of their goals, their vision for the work, the annual Congress. You see publications, lectures. These are all actually illustrations that Hewlin's friend Von Shelton did. You see, they're very interested in both, doing headquarters conferences and study groups, but also going out to the general public through, film and radio. Radio was a thing that they were really interested in. Earlier in 1944, Hewlin had written to Edgar saying, Dad, could you give me, 10 or 15 little tiny 30-second radio spots that I could try to get on the air? And Edgar says, no, I don't really have time for that. But Hewlin tried. And so Hewlin was fixed on the radios. He had tried that before in the late 30s when he did the Mysteries of the Mind radio program through WOR New York. And so he would collect letters from people all over the country detailing their psychic experiences, and they would dramatize them on the air and have two scientists kind of go back and forth of what they felt if the phenomena was, real or not, which is really interesting. To see in this, report from 1946 and kind of get an idea of what was their, grand plan for the work. And so Gladys was, at the end of this report, she says, our membership includes many of the potential spiritual leaders in America today. It includes some of the finest minds in our land. We certainly have one of the most unique and most valuable collections of psychic data. And so after so much debate, the A.R.E. finally realizes their identity. So research, starting the indexing process of the readings that would start in the late 40s and would not finish until 1971. And also enlightenment, so outreach, so getting the word out about the readings and how they could help people physically, mentally, and spiritually. By the late 40s into the early 50s, they're still working out of the Art of Crescent House. So we actually have a copy of Gertrude Cayce's will. So she willed the house to her two sons, Hewlin and Edgar Evans, but she also stipulated that the A.R.E. could rent out space in the house and nothing would have to change. So they, keep on Art of Crescent for a few years, and they slowly figure out that they're gonna need more room than what they had. They're just outgrowing their place. And so that's really illustrated in a 1951 letter that this gentleman wrote. This is Al Turner. This is Gladys Davis's first husband. They were married in 1952. And he's from Philadelphia, and he'd become an A.R.E member years before, and is very interested in the Bible readings, Bible related readings especially. And so he came down in the early 50s to Virginia Beach, moved down from Philadelphia, and wanted to help out the headquarters any way he could. So the House Committee that we mentioned earlier is still working at this time, and in a letter to Hugh Lynn, he's writing, "While taking a shower in Edgar Cayce's shower room, I thought, the association ought to have a larger, longer shower curtain, so the water wouldn't run all over the floor. So under separate cover to you, from Sears, is a blue shower curtain, the shower room." So he has this whole list of the association ought to list. And so he's thinking about, what are the practical things that need to go on here so we all can have a functioning place to work. And so in the mid-1950s, the board decides, we're going to think about moving out of Arctic Crescent, of possibly moving back to the Cayce Hospital building, which had come up for sale. Now, after the National Investigators had dissolved in 1931, the hospital building had been a nightclub for several years and had several different incarnations as different owners took it over. And so by the middle of the 1950s, it had been a theater company's headquarters, and they use it for performances and practice. And so the A.R.E actually sent out a survey to all the members where you could check a box. Do you want to purchase the hospital building back, or do you not? And so it was decided, yes, we're going to. And so the image on the right is the artist depiction of what they envisioned the hospital building to look like. You see, you've got that rectangular open yard right there. That is actually the dance floor that was built in front of the hospital building when it was a nightclub. It was advertised as the best dancing in Virginia Beach. And you actually see in the middle of that bottom porch, you can see where the bandstand is, where our two steps in front of the building that curve up are. That's where all the bands would play. And so it's really interesting looking through the booklet and seeing how they're revamping it, adding a more 1950s flavor to the interior and making it their own again. And so they basically returned to where it had started all these years ago in the late 1920s. And so, what I see throughout all of these events is that we've got ordinary people from all walks of life, they're banding together. They have this confusing situation, but they turn it into a clear vision. And they're creating this community of learning around their readings. And we're basically living their dream now, like here in the digital space, like we've overcome the obstacles of our current situation to be here together tonight. And so I think this poem from Thomas Segura that he wrote in his yearbook in 1930 really sums up the importance of all of the records of behind the scenes of the Cayce work in the Edgar Cayce Foundation archive. So he writes, casting backwards that we may see tomorrow, calling on the tangible, we may solve the intangible. Reading the immortal, we may understand the transitory. Learning life that we may live it better. And that's what I think pretty sums up the purpose of the archive. Study people that have come before us, how they made the decisions that they did, and you're getting better informed so that you can make decisions for yourself to make a brighter future for this work. But thank you all very much. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'd love to take any questions that you may have. Right, so I've got first question. Did you know much about Cayce and the work before you joined ECF? You seem to have a very personal connection to it. I was a little aware of Edgar Cayce. So I was a history major in college, and I did my senior thesis on 19th century spiritualism. So I was really interested in how they tied, speaking to the dead with social causes. So a lot of suffragists were spiritualists. Um, being a medium and having a lecture tour, that was an unorthodox but great way for a woman in the 19th century to have an income and be able to travel. And so all the books on spiritualism in the 19th century were next to some books on Edgar Cayce. So I was aware of him, but he was outside like my research scope. So I didn't, delve into his work that much. I actually didn't know about ECF or the A.R.E. until I started searching for archives jobs. So the Society of American Archivists has a directory for job seekers. And so the semester before I graduated from grad school, I and my dad as well, we were just searching, the listserv, trying to find things that would, be possibilities. And he sent me the link to ECF. He said, it kind of looks up your alley. You should kind of try it out and see if it may be a match. And so I was, very excited to have this opportunity to join ECF. And so I've just been, fascinated. Like, there's never a boring day in the archive here, especially this one. It's just fascinating every single day. And I'm just so intrigued by the amount of people from all over the country that found themselves drawn to the Edgar Cayce work and dedicated all that time and energy and resources to it. It's just really, really intriguing to me. I've got two more questions, I think. Here. I have a question, were Edgar's talks ever recorded? Not on audio. We have, one audio clip of Edgar Cayce, and we've got a video taken at Congress in 1939, so it has no sound. It's a color film of Edgar and a group of people in front of the Art of Crescent House for a June Congress in 1939. But we do have transcripts of the talks that he gave in the mid-1930s. We've actually got a selection of them that were published, I believe, in the late 90s, early 2000s. Richard Peterson, who worked at the archive previously, put them all together in a book, and it's called In a Waking State. And it's, really interesting to see from Edgar's own perspective about his work. I have a question. Has anyone tried to make a movie out of all of this? Several times throughout the 20th century, from Thomas Segru thinking about doing a screen treatment, kind of putting out feelers, and every so often through the late 50s, 60s, and 70s, into the 80s and 90s. So we have records when those processes started, but there hasn't been like a major motion picture made about Edgar Cayce yet. I have another question here. Do you know why A.R.E. sold the Arctic Circle property? Seems like that would have been worthwhile to have historically. I agree. I guess the chance to have the hospital again, something that was so integral to the work. The Cayce family moved several times during their time in Virginia Beach, several different properties. So, you might imagine that the hospital building had a lot more pull than a residence, perhaps. It would have been nice that it had that house survived. It was next to what is the Star of the Sea Catholic Church, in Virginia Beach, and the house was actually used by the fire department as a control burn in the 1980s. And so the house doesn't stand anymore. But we do have in Gladys Davis's collection, we have a plaque that was on Edgar Cayce's office door. And so after his death, they actually dedicated Edgar's office as the first meditation room. And so Gladys saved that from the door and have it in our collection. Another question, how did Gladys deal with the volume of mail she received after Edgar died? Must have been overwhelming. Yes, she definitely mentions it was overwhelming, and even in the months before that. And so when There's a River was published and the magazine article came out, they would be getting hundreds of letters a day. It came to the point that the Virginia Beach post office actually called the house and said, "We refuse to take your mail to you." So they actually had to go retrieve the mail from the post office, bring it back to the house, and actually Gertrude Cayce did that most often. The family actually bought her a Pontiac car. She was, the main driver, and she would go every day and get mail sacks from the post office and go back to the office so they could sort it out. The volume was just incredible. All right, so thank you so much for joining me tonight. Please, if you would like to know more information about the archive, the work that we are doing, please visit us at edgarcaycefoundation.org. We've actually just revamped our website. We have a whole new layout, which I'm super excited about. We switched over to a new catalog system called Archivist, and so you can actually go in there and view all of the material that we have cataloged right now down to the folder level. We do a lot of work on social media as well, and we have started a YouTube channel. We started back in April, and so if you search for Edgar Cayce Foundation Archives in YouTube, it'll take you right to it. So everyone have a wonderful evening, stay safe and well, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Hello, this is John Van Auken. I'm the director of the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and I want to speak to you about some of the fascinating topics that Edgar Cayce was able to address when he could attune his mind to the universal consciousness, a huge collective mind in which all existed. The Akashic record was readable there, or what we in the West call the Book of Life. And he covered many topics that are very valuable to you and me, such as the importance of meditation and prayer, holistic health, body, mind, spirit are all working together. We're an organism, not separate parts. They're integrated. And our souls have been on a long journey, long before we were physically born and long after we physically die. Our souls are alive and active in other dimensions of life. This is his theme of reincarnation and karma, which is a fascinating one. And that's the topic I'd like to speak with you about today in this brief introductory video. Reincarnation for Edgar Cayce was a soul journey, not our personalities. We are one life to live and then the judgment. Or as the near-death experience people have told us, you see your life in panoramic view and you feel, oh, good there, oh, not so good there, and all as you scan when you have passed on from physical life. But the soul has multiple eternal dynamics to it, and it has had many experiences. The ones we are most interested in are past lives and the karma of past lives in both our relationships with other souls and with ourselves, our personal karma. And Cayce speaks about how to resolve karma, how to resolve difficult relationships, how to change habit patterns that the soul has developed and affect us in our attitudes, perspectives, and these patterns of behavior that we have developed long before this lifetime. I have had 3 children, and I can tell you each one was quite different than the other, bringing with them their own patterns, their own habits, their own perspectives on life. Even though I trained them, and my wife and I trained them as well as we could, they already had a bit of their own angle, and that's the soul inside. So for Cayce, there is no one in this incarnation, or rarely anyone in this incarnation, that you and I haven't known in the soul realm before and in a past life. So the parents we came into, the mother we had, is part of a force of nature that is cause and effect, or sow and reap. And what goes around comes around. This is the concept of karmic energy influencing our path, especially our soul's path. And how we react to these relationships and these situations in this life determines how we liberate ourselves from this repetitive pattern and these karmic dynamics in our life, and move into grace and freedom, liberation. So one of the key principles of Cayce is soul groups. We have been traveling in soul groups. So most everyone we know, we have known. Some we have had very good relationships with, maybe not in all sectors of life, but in many. And others we have had poor relationships with, or we have abused them, or they have abused us. We might have broken their heart. They might have broken our heart. These things are innate in the cellular memory of us. When our soul comes into this body, it comes in through the fontanelle, the soft spot in our baby body, and pushes itself into the nervous system. And as we develop, the soul sees through the same eyes you and I see through. And my soul has a perspective on things. And the situations before us are opportunities, even the challenges, even the negative situations, even the hardships and the negative people. They are opportunities for our soul to react in a different way, to think differently, to speak differently. And as we do so, we liberate ourselves from these patterns. And we build the future for our soul. Soul growth was his main lesson of reincarnation and karma. Karma was never intended for retribution. It was enlightenment. Here's what your actions and thoughts and words have affected others and even yourself on your own self-judgment. And of course, his theme was harmony and cooperation with the whole of the creation. And he said, using the fruits of the Spirit, which is kindness, patience, understanding, gentleness, forgiveness, these things transform us, heal us, and bring out the better self. And that's why the soul's on a journey. If you would like to learn more about this and get more involved in his wonderful insights into human conditions and the purpose and mission of life for the soul, go to edgarcayce.org/join and become a member. Get all sorts of material to help you gain the understanding using his insights from the universal consciousness. Thank you. Goodbye.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Edgar Cayce Foundation. I'm Jessica, and today we'll be looking at some of our 1970s records, continuing our celebration of A.R.E.'s 90th anniversary. Now, we were really excited last week to receive a donation from a filmmaker named Bob Terrio. He came to Virginia Beach in 1975 to create a film about Edgar Cayce and the work of the A.R.E. Ewan invited him down here, and he was able to interview several staff members as well that knew Edgar Cayce and had been working with the material for years and years. And so we have both the original film and audio recordings as well as digitized versions, which is really great that we'll be able to access these films. So I'll show you a little bit about how we take care of the films. So we're going to be taking them out of the original canisters, and we're going to be placing them in these archival storage holders, and they're made of a chemically inert plastic, so it'll provide a nice, safe, stable environment for these films to live in. We're also going to be putting them in our archival storage over here. And we keep this at a steady 64 degrees. That's a standard temperature for archival storage rooms. And we do this because we do have a variety of formats, not just paper collections and photographs, but audiovisual and artifacts as well. And so you want, these things to be in as cool an environment as possible that slows down the rate of deterioration. Here, this is an example of one of the audio reels in the collection as well. And we have a ton of these kinds of magnetic reels in the archive. The ECF's audiovisual collection pretty much spans every format you could think of from the 20th century, from records, shellac records to LPs, all the way through film reel to beta tape to VHS. And so one of our largest projects that we are working on is getting a handle on all of these materials, finding which ones are the most fragile, creating a digitization schedule. And so eventually what we will have is a wonderful collection of photographs and audio recordings and films that we'll be able to have patrons view. So we're really excited about that project. I pulled some of our different materials. You can kind of have an idea of what we have. This is an LP. This is radio programs that Walter McGraw did in the late 1950s, early 1960s with staff members of the Foundation. And so this will be housed in a acid-free folder that fits the size of this record, and it's going to be stored vertically. You want to store records vertically so there's no pressure on the grooves here. Now the sound is created when the needle of the record player goes into these grooves. And so if you store it flat or with anything else on top of it that's pushing weight down upon that record, you're going to squish the grooves of your record and the sound quality will go down. So it's really important to make sure that they're stacked side by side and without any pressure on the record itself. We also have a lot of slides. We have a very large photograph collection, and it's not only your typical photographs, we have slides as well. These are ectochrome slides, pictures of the staff from the 1970s. And so we'll be able to scan these as well. And so we'll have them in scan preservation format as well as these physical format too. So if you're interested in how to preserve audiovisual formats, say you have family films at home, family photographs or recordings, I definitely recommend checking out books on preservation, such as this. This is Moving Image and Sound Collections for Archivists. And this has been a great resource for us as we're getting a handle on our audiovisual collection. I'll kind of show you what we're talking about here when we're looking at all of these different preservation formats that we need to get a handle on. And in section 1C, we have our audiovisual stuff. So it's pretty much categorized, by format. These are some of our audio reels. These date from the 1950s into the 70s. All different types and brands that were used over time. Moving into some of our film. See, we have some already rehoused here, and others in their original plastic cases. And these are interviews. These are films made by the different departments of A.R.E. over time. For example, this was from our field conferences department. And so you could write to headquarters in Virginia Beach, and they would send you the films that you needed for your programs. And this one is still in that, traveling case here, which is pretty cool. The other side, this is all of our tapes, our video cassettes, our betas and pneumatic tapes. And these will all be reformatted. So it's going to be a large project, but we're really excited to get started on it because a lot of this part of our collection hasn't been accessed in quite a long time. So there's a lot of wonderful material that we're excited to be able to share with you as we move forward with this. So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments. I'd love to answer them. So have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and I'll see you next time.
Hello, thank you for joining me for a new A.R.E. Inside Connection, where we bring you the behind the scenes of the happenings at Edgar Cayce's A.R.E. My name is Loretto, I am the marketing coordinator here, and today I am talking with Karen Bolt. She is our outreach services coordinator, and she oversees the study group, prayer, and meditation services. Welcome, Karen. How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited about our conversation that we're going to have. Our study groups and prayer departments are such a big part of our organization, and I feel like not many people know about them, especially if they're new to the Cayce material or to the A.R.E., and I'm just excited to shine a little light on these programs. So tell me a little bit about the history behind the study group and the prayer group readings and how it all got started.
Well, the study group readings actually came out of a time of turmoil for Edgar Cayce and the people that surrounded him. He had just lost the hospital. It was in 1931. He had lost the hospital, not only the hospital, but his home. So he was very despondent. And a group of people who had been getting readings, some physical readings, many of them had gotten life readings from him, which told them about their past lives, which was very interesting, gathered around. And I heard a lecture from Edgar Cayce. We have audio tapes of him talking about this meeting that they had. And they thought that, number one, it would cheer him up to have a gathering and to do a reading. He said he didn't think anything was going to come of it. A lot of people gathered just to see each other for one more time because there really was uncertainty about how the organization would begin. The A.R.E., as we know it, hadn't been developed yet. And so they gathered together, and Hewlin said that most of them were hoping that they were just going to get one last reading. Because oftentimes when he gathered people together, he would give them a personal reading. So they were hoping that they were going to have one last personal reading with him. And what actually happened when he went into trance was this beautiful reading that said that these people had gathered here, that they had worked together before, and that they were to study together to learn how to actually maximize the spiritual laws here while they were on Earth, and that they would actually be a light to the waiting world, which was a very powerful statement.
That is very powerful.
Yes, and Hewlin said that many of them were very surprised. They were very shocked. And I'm sure afterwards milled about to try to figure out what was actually supposed to happen afterwards. And from that, a couple of nights later, Edgar Cayce had a dream, and he was told that the group work that he had referred to in the earlier reading was not finished, it was not complete. And he named 7 members of the original study group, because in this, there were, I think, 12 original members of the study group who gathered together. And out of that set, there were 7 that were named that were said to form a healing circle. And so along with their commitment to study this series of readings, which became the 262 readings, which was eventually compiled into the 24 lessons that we now know as A Search for God, Book 1 and Book 2, they had to do homework. They were given a book assignment and a book list. They had to apply what the readings told them about in their personal lives, and then they had to report back. And so on top of that, 7 other people were pulled and were actually mentioned by name in this dream.
Oh, wow. All of it came from the reading?
He had this first reading, which is the 262-1, with this group of people. And then he had a dream a couple of nights later that said he needed to form a healing circle, that to actually become fully what he called psychic, which means aware of your soul, that what you would need to do along with all of these practicing of spiritual laws. And I also believe because they dedicated themselves to pray and meditate with each other and for each other daily. They picked a time where they all could do it at the same time. One of those times was at 2 a.m., which I don't know if a lot of us would be willing to wake up at 2 o'clock to meditate with our study group, but that was one of the tasks that they were given. And so I believe from studying this material I've been studying it for over a decade, I think it's because of that daily prayer and meditation that they took on that this healing circle was necessary. And it delves a lot into how to apply the energy from the prayer and meditation that you're doing in your life to become a healing channel. And so those 7 became the prayer group, and they often had a study group reading, and then they would have a little break, and then they would have a prayer group reading following that. So some of them were, if you think, those of us who have been in study groups before, sometimes I think, oh my gosh, I've just got too much to do. I've forgotten to do my discipline, and I just can't imagine on top of doing your study group work, you're also going to have to do your prayer group work on top of that. So,
well, this is really fascinating. I don't think I quite knew all the history behind it. So does the glad helpers, did that come from the prayer group? Is that?
Yes, it was called the Healing Circle in the Dream. It was then referred to as the prayer group usually. And then they were asked for a specific name, because I think what was also happening, and those of you who have been in study groups before will know this, many of the study groups have their own prayer lists, and they will pray and meditate at the end of their study group meetings. So there is a portion of that group study of the 262 readings, the A Search for God readings, where you pray and meditate for each other. And so I think there may have been some confusion. And so they were asked what name they should be called, and they were told that they should be called either the Glad Helpers or the Glad Helpers Healing Prayer Group. And so Glad Helpers is shorter, so that's usually what people refer to it.
Wow. So what is the difference today between a study group and a prayer group?
Well, the prayer group is one of the only groups that has continuously met since 1931. And so the Glad Helpers that used to meet, we still are meeting online with the pandemic, have been meeting continuously, and even in the pandemic have been meeting continuously since 1931, which I think is very impressive. Of course, it's a different group of people, but we have right now about 20 people who are dedicate to pray and meditate for themselves, for the other group members, as well as for our international prayer healing list, which is another service that we provide. And so the difference is this group studies the 281 series. It's very similar in the platform and the way that it works. And the prayer group studies the 281 series. When you're in a study group, you study the 262 readings. But then the Glad Helpers go a little bit further, because the 281 series and the prayer group are referred to as the prayer group meetings. It's also referred to as meditation part 1, because it was a library series book. And all of these things are actually available to you if you're interested in referring to them later or purchasing your own copy. You would study that. Then we would pray and meditate together, which is also what happens in the study group. But after that, there's an additional, because the group has focused on raising the healing energy, there's laying on of hands that happens in the Glad Helper prayer group. And there is also each Wednesday morning, we pray for every country in the world. So we have our laying on of hands portion where you can receive energy from a channel that's also emphasized from the group meditation. And then we do a world prayer where we pray for all the countries. And then we also gather names for the prayer list that we pray for every month as well. So it's just focused on a different aspect, I think, but both have prayer and meditation in them.
Yeah, and so what is the connection between prayer and meditation?
Well, prayer and meditation, usually when people simplify into a couple of sentences, is that prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening to God. In terms of, and there's a lot of, in the 281 series, the prayer group meeting series, there's a lot of information about preparing yourself for meditation. And that includes preparing your body, your mind, and your spirit to sort of connect with the divine.
Right.
They come together as one, and then you're pulling that universal divine energy into you and actually causing a sensation in your body that activates your chakra. In the study group readings, it's talked about that we have a soul that is then surrounded by an etheric or energy body and then a physical shell. And when you meditate, you're actually raising that vibration. And so your soul is actually vibrating with that etheric body, causing your actual physical shell to vibrate. And that's where the healing comes from. And so, so prayer is basically a preparation. It's one of many preparations. And it's particularly, I think, helpful and beneficial when you're having a group meditation. To focus the group mind, so to speak, or the collective mind onto one voice, one thought. And that's where the affirmations come in as well. And many people are familiar with using an affirmation during meditation. So prayer is basically a cleansing process. I often say it's sort of preparing the table. You're inviting the Holy Spirit and the divine to come and sup with you, so to speak, as it says in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And the prayer is just sort of clearing the table. And there are many types of prayers. There's prayers of thanksgiving. There's prayers, of atonement. So depending on what you're trying to achieve with your meditation, you're going to use a different type of prayer.
And is there a difference between having an individual meditation and a group meditation as the way that you go about it?
I think there are. First of all, in terms of process and etiquette, when you're meditating individually, and this was given in both the study group readings and in the prayer group readings, you use what tools work best for you. And many of us have had many past lives, and many of the original study group members and prayer group members were told that they had past lives together and separately. And so when they gathered together as a group, some of them were going to gravitate towards some things and some were going to gravitate towards something else. So if somebody, perhaps in a past life in Egypt, had incense, then during their meditations, during this lifetime, they may also be attracted to meditation. So the tools are more personalized when you're doing an individual meditation. When you're doing a group meditation, you have to be aware of all of the preferences of the group because you're trying to form a group collective. The readings talk about our connection with the divine as being both personal and individual because we have a spark and a part of the divine within us, according to the readings, as well as collective. So what you're really doing is attuning your individual energy into that collective energy with the group. So you're trying to open yourself up, you're trying to be as accommodating as possible. So if somebody is bothered by smell, you certainly don't want to have an incense going in a group meditation. It also is helpful in a group meditation to have one affirmation that everyone is focusing on. Mm-hmm. Because again, what you're trying to do, the purpose sometimes in an individual and a group meditation may be different. So depending on what the purpose is, would depend on what the group would focus on. So oftentimes a person who is meditating individually may be using it as a healing process, but may also be using it because individual readings were also given about meditation, and people were told that they could use it for healing purposes. They could use it to answer any question, particularly a yes or no question, to go into meditation and to ask the question, to release it, to focus, and then come out and an answer would be given. So depending individually, you could have many different things going on, but typically for a group meditation, you're meditating as a group for a purpose. You're not usually with a big group of people and everybody just decides to individually meditate for no reason.
Yeah.
Although that would be awesome. A flash mob meditation I think would be great. But typically you're gathered together for a purpose. And you want to be everyone focused on the same affirmation, because it's giving, what prayer does is just emphasize the thought pattern or the thought that you're having. And so if you're all focusing on one affirmation, then that thought pattern is more powerful, the energy is more powerful. The readings talked about 3 things that you needed in meditation. You needed silence. You needed an affirmation to focus the mental and also as well as to create that energy. And then you needed to have, and this is particularly in a group meditation, I feel, you need to have a reciprocation. There needs to be a releasing of energy, because what you're trying to do in meditation is increase your vibration and your energy flow through the most typically in the readings it talked about the Christ consciousness. You're trying to raise that vibration to such an extent that it actually overflows. So your cup overfloweth, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so you take what you need for yourself, and then you give what isn't needed for yourself to others, or to the world. Cayce often referred to it as to the nations.
I know we have study groups all across the United States and all over the world. Can you tell me about how many study groups we currently have officially? I know there's probably many more out there that are, maybe unofficial, but I know we have so many.
We are actually in the process right now. So if anyone is watching this or listening to it and has a study group, we're doing our affiliation process. But right now we have about 370 groups in the United States. And I'm sorry, my phone is ringing in the background. I forgot to turn it off. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, let me turn it off. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Oh, and I was doing so well. Okay. I was doing so well. Okay, I silenced it. I apologize.
Should I start the question over?
Is that what you would do, Kevin? Okay. My apologies. I've turned it off.
Okay. Okay. So I know that we have study groups all across the United States and all over the world. And can you tell us a little bit more? Okay, now I can't do it. Okay.
Sorry, we were on a roll. We were doing good.
No. Okay, here we go. I know that we have study groups all across the United States and all over the world. Can you tell me a little bit about how many study groups we currently have officially?
Absolutely. Officially on record, which there are many groups. If you're out there, please give me a call. You can look me up on the website. Officially, we have roughly 370 groups in the United States. We have probably roughly around 200 international groups that we're aware of, but we don't currently have any official numbers on our international groups. So we'd certainly love to hear from them as well. And you can find, if there's a local group in your area, on our web page, if you go under the About Us and link to the study group page, there is a United States map. And you can click on the state and it will give you a city listing and a contact listing of the person in your area who may be hosting a group. Most groups now, because of the pandemic, are online. And we also have a few groups that are meeting at headquarters, as well as a group that I host on Tuesday nights that are available online for people who don't have a group in their local area and are interested in possibly joining a group or creating a group of their own.
So can you, for people that don't really know about study groups, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do during a meeting?
Sure. The meeting is about an hour and a half long. You open up with any sort of business that you may have, and then you study the actual A Search for God book, and there, like I said before, there's 24 chapters. So you start with book 1 has 12 chapters, and then you go to book 2. You study for about an hour, which usually means that someone is reading the text, and then you're asking for feedback, you're asking for questions, you're asking for experiences that other people may have had with what the material is talking about. And then once you're finished talking and studying the material, you then decide and pull something, because the original group was given what they were called disciplines, but most people don't like that word, so they changed it to experiments. Some people know them as disciplines, some people know them as experiments. You pull from the material that you read something that you can apply in your daily life. And you commit to not only praying for yourself and for the group members, but also to doing this experiment using this spiritual concept in your daily life. And if you feel like it, the following week, reporting on your experiences that you have trying to apply that in your daily life. And then once you've chosen an experiment, there is the prayer and meditation portion. And usually that lasts for about a half an hour. Most of the groups use the affirmation from the chapter. And then they have their prayer and their meditation portion. They pray for each other. Usually one person will lead the prayer and meditation portion. It is facilitated by everyone in the group, so people take turns sort of leading the meeting. And it's really a lovely experience, particularly on how to, oftentimes we'll read the thought of the day, or we will be attracted to a certain reading, but we don't understand how to apply it in our daily life. So it's really nice to sort of take that sort of conceptual subject and then actually live it.
The study groups have been very helpful for me, especially as I am trying to learn more about the Cayce material and the readings, and just kind of really go deeper into my spiritual growth. So I highly recommend joining a study group if you have one available in your area. And I know that Karen, you can be reached by going to our website under About Us and finding the study group page. If anybody has any questions about study groups or want to know more about how to get involved or starting your own group. So we are excited about this. It's been going on for a very long time, and it's one of the foundations of the organization. So
it really is. It really was what impelled the organization forward and those people forward to actually form the Association for Research and Enlightenment. And really those core group of people were the foundation of the organization and helping it move forward after Edgar Cayce died in 1945.
yeah, and I mean, I find it incredibly impressive and powerful that the Glad Helpers are still, meeting since the beginning, and it's continuing. I think it just brings me so much joy.
I was a little concerned with the pandemic that, how is it going to work? But it has worked beautifully. The group has come together. And so if you feel a little bit lighter and a little bit brighter on Wednesday mornings, it's because the Glad Helper group is praying for all of the members of the organization, for all the staff, for all the volunteers, and for all the beings in all of the countries of the world. So we so appreciate all that the staff does to help support the study group program and the prayer group program, and certainly all the members and the volunteers that do that as well.
I also want to mention that we do have a meditation that we do Monday through Friday at noon, and we used to do it at in the meditation room here in headquarters, staff-led for the public and staff. And now with the pandemic, we've brought it to Facebook. So now we do a live Facebook meditation Monday through Friday at noon on our Facebook page. And it has been wonderful to be able to do that and be able to reach people all over the world and have them come and meditate with us. We have people from Europe and Asia, and it's just so incredible to see and be able to kind of connect a little bit more.
That service has been fantastic. Again, I was a little concerned with the pandemic, how we were going to continue to do that. But I think, as the readings say, you turn your stumbling blocks into stepping stones, and it's been a marvelous way for us not to only reach people from different areas during that live time, but all of those videos are accessible on the Facebook page, so you can really enjoy that noon meditation anytime that you have about 15 minutes to spare. And we have so many wonderful volunteers who are doing that, and we so appreciate them, and we so appreciate all the comments and the love that's given from everybody who is participating as well.
Well, thank you, Karen. I really enjoyed our conversation and really getting to know a little bit more about the history of the study groups and the Glad Helpers, and just being able to know more about all these amazing services that we have and programs that we have. So thank you so much for everything that you do and for teaching us a little bit more about this.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope it's been informative, and that if you're interested, please find a group and join it, or I'm happy to help you start one of your own.
Thank you so much, Karen. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Cayce saw total health as encompassing the physical, mental, and spiritual components of the individual, and offered important insights into how each of us can stay well. The readings make recommendations for hundreds of health concerns, from diet, childbirth, and longevity, to arthritis, cancer, and psoriasis. Called the father of holistic medicine, Cayce was ahead of his time in describing the workings of the human body and foreseeing the direction of health care. Not only did Cayce prescribe treatments for patients, occasionally he even recommended certain doctors for them to go to, although he had no conscious knowledge of them. One such individual was Dr. Harold J. Riley.
The number one thing is mind, body, spirit. He brings it all together and hands it to you on a silver plate. Here it is. This is you, the universe, the earth, everything in a nutshell.
It was the health information that led the Cayce family to Virginia Beach in the mid-1920s. One of Cayce's lifelong dreams was to build a hospital and to form an organization that would work with his psychic information. The readings advised the location, Virginia Beach, then a small resort town, and it was there that the hospital was built. Although lost during the Depression, the building was bought back in the mid-50s, and from that day forward became association headquarters. Today, the principles of healing remain the same and are explored by individuals, physicians, researchers, and healthcare practitioners throughout the world.
We find that these conditions arose as the result of what might be called occupational disturbances, not enough in the sun, not enough hard work. There has been plenty of brain work, but the body is supposed to coordinate the spiritual, mental, and physical. He who does not give recreation a place in his life and the proper tone to each phase, well, he just fools himself. Someday he pays the price.
The consciousness, our soul, continues. We didn't start here, nor do we end here. It's sort of the idea that we are in the body at this particular time in a given lifetime, but once we pass out of it, we still have our individuality. In other words, the soul survives. And that was Cayce's view, that we change places. We go to different realms of consciousness, but we never really die.
To find that you lived, died, and were buried under the cherry tree in grandmother's garden does not make you one whit a better person. But to know that you spoke unkindly and suffered for it, and in the present may correct it by being righteous, that is worthwhile. For each soul constantly meets itself. And if each soul would but understand those hardships which are accredited much to others are caused most by self, know that in those you are meeting thyself.
The Cayce approach to reincarnation provides a philosophical setting to the past, focusing on practical ways of dealing with this life, living, growing, and being of service to one another in the present, in this time, in this place, right now.
The first publicity was really the New York Times in 1910. They ran a full-page spread about the illiterate man who became a doctor when hypnotized. He wasn't illiterate, but that was a better headline. But it was an amazing ability to somehow tune into someone at a distance. I would say that for many years he had essentially 2 readings a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon.
The building itself is located at Virginia Beach, Virginia, on a beautiful hillside that stretches back from the Ocean Boulevard. It commands an unobstructed view of the ocean from Cape Henry in the entrance of Chesapeake Bay on the north and Virginia Beach on the south. The front looks out upon a flower-studded terrace of green, beyond which the broad expanse of the Atlantic may be seen. From the quiet restfulness of the wide verandas, an ever-changing panorama is presented in the distance. Battleships, schooners, pleasure yachts, freighters of every kind and from every port. The surrounding country is ideally suited for such an institution and such an important scientific experiment as our investigators seek to make in this hospital.
Edgar Cayce founded the A.R.E. in 1931, really as a membership/research organization where people could come and see what this material was all about. It wasn't really until 1942 when his biography, There Is a River, came out. It was really his life story. And people bought that book and became very interested. And then the following year, 1943, Coronet magazine published an article called The Miracle Man of Virginia Beach. And Coronet was really the life magazine of its day. And because of those two publications, the requests for reading became so frequent that Edgar Cayce told his secretary to book in advance in order to stay kept up with the demand. He was really worried about all these people. The postman was apparently delivering bags of mail each day. Eventually, Edgar Cayce wore himself out and had a stroke. And when he died, he had been booked 8 readings a day, 2 years in advance. So truly toward the end of his life, people realized that his gift was remarkable, and so many people wanted help.
The building opened to the public in 1975, but the journey to build it started years earlier. In the early 1960s, it became apparent that the A.R.E. was running out of space in the Cayce Hospital building, which it had moved to fairly recently in 1956. The library's book collection had already outgrown the space, with hundreds of books now having to be stored in the basement. Staff offices were getting cramped despite the addition of the Wynn Press building to campus in 1962. The Cayce Hospital's structural integrity was in question. The pipes were rotting in the walls, wrote Hewlett Cayce in a letter. Staff formed a building committee to look at their options. Levitt Associates of Norfolk submitted a proposal in 1966 for design made of circles and curvilinear shapes, covered in white stucco and plaster. According to the architects, quote, by its plastic form, the design of the building suggests the flexibility that man must possess in his pursuit of enlightenment.
We have the Cayce Riley School of Massage that trains people in massage therapy. I believe we've graduated about 2,100 different students from 18 different countries.
Today, the A.R.E. community has grown to tens of thousands of members around the world with regional offices and programs that include international outreach, conferences, and educational activities reaching nearly 1 million people worldwide. Recent projects, such as remodeling the meditation room and total reconstruction of the A.R.E.'s retaining wall, will help to revitalize the A.R.E. and propel the organization into the future.
Well, good morning. Welcome to another Wellness Wednesday. Dr. Jean-Paul Lamonte coming to you live from Edgar Cayce's A.R.E. Facebook page. Thank you so much for waiting. We were on a little bit of a spring break, but now we are back and so glad to be back here with you. We typically meet every Wednesday morning around 7:15 in the morning. I'm the lead clinician and instructor at Edgar Cayce's A.R.E. And this morning, it's all about the healing power of forgiveness. You see, in many instances and cases where we've gone through, great challenges, traumas, abuses, or any time that we're ready to really release, whether it's a relationship that needs to be moved on from, or just anything from our past with regards to friends, family, or loved ones that needs forgiveness, this is such an intrinsic, important part of healing. Because most of the things that tend to hold us back and trigger emotional responses usually come from our pasts. And so one of the best ways to energetically clear and release is forgiveness, which is always easier said than done. So one of my favorite methods that I've used personally over the years is from the Hawaiian Kunas, which is the Ho'oponopono. And so in the Kahuna tribe, the elders found that doing this repeated mantra of I'm so sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and I thank you, and repeated over and over again in succession literally helps us to release and forgive any past things that are essentially holding us back, and certainly one of the greatest spiritual healing traditions. And actually they tried using Ho'oponopono with prisoners and many people, and they all found positive benefits and results. So I'd encourage you to certainly do this today. So first begin by creating a nice sacred space. I like to light a candle and have some of my favorite objects again, you're just essentially trying to create a small little space to be present, calm, and centered. And then, certainly, once you've lit your candle, you want to hold into your mind's eye, and certainly in your heart center, the individual or whatever the fault was, or whatever the trauma was that needs to be released and forgiven. And oftentimes I'll take a few deep breaths, meditate, hold that into my awareness, and just begin that repeated mantra of I am so sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And again, I am so sorry. And the important thing is to really feel the energies, feel the words as you're saying them. And even if the person is passed on or gone, you can even hold them in your mind's eye. And one way I like to work with this is first, when I'm thinking of someone who's passed, is really connect with the humor and the laughter. So kind of engage with that. And then keeping this person in my awareness, then really naming what needs to be forgiven and focusing on that releasement of energy. So again, if you can find a nice, calm, quiet space, and any relationships that need to be released, or certainly any hurt that needs to be forgiven, hold it in your mind's eye right now and simply say, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. So try Ho'oponopono and many other methods of forgiveness as well. In fact, this was one of the most common practices of Christ, as well as many other spiritual traditions, all have this recognition that the power of divinity within us has the ability to release any past hurts and traumas. And so, most importantly, is applying this not only throughout your individual lives, but also throughout the world in our practices. And I would highly encourage you, before any healing can begin, is to first start off with that spiritual energy and the healing power of forgiveness. So thanks for tuning in. Again, we tend to meet every Wednesday morning around 7:15 a.m., give or take a few minutes. If you want to come on down to the A.R.E., check us out. We're down here at 67th Street in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Most importantly, we got the 90th anniversary Congress coming up. It's never been a better time to be a member. We have Wellness Wednesdays, as well as John Van Auken coming up here towards the end of the month. June 30th, we'll be doing a special presentation on spirituality in America, right in time for the 4th of July. So have a wonderful Well Wednesday, everyone. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.
Hello, I'm John Van Auken, one of the directors here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the A.R.E. Have you ever wondered whether there is more to life? Do you know your soul's unique purpose and reason for being on the earth at this time? For nearly 100 years, America's most amazing seer, Edgar Cayce, and the organization that grew from those early beginnings has been providing tools for personal empowerment and spiritual growth. You can explore issues of body, mind, and spirit within a community of like-minded people. Quarterly, we publish a mystery-revealing magazine titled Venture Inward. Members also have access to an exclusive online membership section with all 14,306 Edgar Cayce readings in a searchable database. Plus, you'll enjoy hours of audio and video materials, including recent events from Virginia Beach and special selections from the archives. We also maintain an extensive health database, online dream interpretation, and a free meditation course.
I always had the philosophy that each and every one of us, as we have a soul, has some kind of psychic ability, and it's why when we form close bonds with each other, we're able to kind of pick up on emotions and that kind of stuff. So I was really excited to learn about how I could better develop my psychic ability through the Edgar Cayce readings and the work.
Join with us and thousands of others who are on this great soul journey.